Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rebuilding Real Life. I'm Mike, and today I want to talk about learning to trust yourself again. I started working on this episode thinking I knew what I was going to talk about. I thought maybe I would talk about keeping promises, following through, and slowly becoming somebody that I could believe again. And those things are part of it, but I realized something a little bit more uncomfortable while I was thinking through my own story. I didn't realize how little I could trust myself during active addiction, because at the time, I genuinely believed that I could. That's what caught me off guard. So today I want to talk about the difference between actually trusting myself and just feeling confident, because those aren't always the same thing to me. So during active addiction, I don't remember walking around thinking, oh my gosh, I can't trust myself. Honestly, I probably thought the opposite. And if the version of me today sat down beside the version of me from my active addiction and said, you really can't trust yourself right now, I honestly think that version of me would have said, I do trust myself. You're speaking gibberish, weirdo. And that's the weird part. I didn't recognize that my judgment had become unreliable because I was using that same exact judgment to decide whether I was okay. I could sincerely want to stop and sincerely believe that my next plan would work and still keep doing the same thing. Last week, I talked about the kind of life that I'm trying to build now that I'm not spending so much of it trying to escape. But if I'm going to build that life, I really have to be honest about how I make decisions also. How do I trust myself without slipping back into false confidence? And how do I admit that I shouldn't trust myself in every situation without making that mean that I'm failing? I don't think self-trust for me really means believing every thought I have or proving I can handle everything. I think it means knowing myself well enough to make the most trustworthy decision that's available to me. And one of the clearest examples that I have, it started with a plan that my wife and I genuinely believed might help me stop using THC. So when I first tried to stop using THC at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, I thought easy access might be one of the biggest problems. So I asked my wife to put my THC stuff somewhere I couldn't get easy access to them. Basically, I asked her to hide them. And I asked for her help because I sincerely believed that if they were out of sight, then they would be out of my mind. And I know now it sounds kind of silly when I say it because, duh, I'm an addict. If I know something's in the house, I'm probably going to try to find it and use it, especially because at the time, I didn't really have other tools for dealing with those hard moments. But at the time, it sounded really reasonable, and I really believed it. I thought making it harder to get might be enough to help me stop. But when she left the house, I started looking for the vapes, for the stuff. I found the places where she put them, and then I used them anyway. And so we only really tried that for a few weeks because it became really obvious to both of us that it wasn't working. And the problem wasn't that she needed a better hiding place. The problem was that I was becoming consumed with finding the thing I had asked her to make harder for me to find. Because when I tried not to use, my thoughts would race and my anxiety could become really extreme. I didn't want to use, but the fastest way that I knew to stop the spiral was to use again. And that was really heartbreaking to me because I could feel how trapped I was becoming. The thing I didn't want to keep doing, it still felt like the only thing that could give me immediate relief. Looking back, asking her to put it somewhere else was already a form of admitting, hey, if I'm around this, I'm probably going to use it. But I wasn't really ready to understand the full meaning of that yet. I still thought I could solve it by changing the access instead of facing like how much control it had gained over my thinking. I was trying to build a better system around the THC when what I really needed was just help getting free from it. I wanted to stop, but wanting to stop wasn't the same as being able to trust myself when the THC was still in the house. And I think I used to treat confidence as evidence that I could trust myself. If I sounded sure enough when I said, hey, I'm going to stop, I wanted that certainty to count for something. And if I came up with a new rule or a new hiding place or a new limit, I could tell myself that this plan would be different. And I wasn't always lying when I said those things. Most of the time, I really meant them. The problem is that I think meaning it in a calm moment doesn't tell me what I'll do when the anxiety, craving, fear, or opportunity shows up. I may have meant every single word, but my behavior was telling a very different story. Active addiction made my thinking pretty wild. I could keep explaining like why the next attempt would work while ignoring what happened during all the attempts before it. I could use the same brain that was protecting my access to decide that I still had everything under control. I don't say that to like beat up the person that I was. I just say it because I need to tell the truth about what happened. I can't really protect my recovery right now from something that I'm pretending isn't a problem. But today, I don't automatically trust a thought just because it came from me. I can slow down and I can look at what has happened before, and I can ask whether a choice is good for my recovery or bad for my recovery. And if I know I'm too close to something to see it clearly, I can get another set of eyes on it. So now, self-trust sometimes just means knowing when not to trust my first answer. And once I understood that, boundaries stopped feeling like proof that I was weak. They started feeling like proof that I was finally being honest. I think sometimes trusting myself means knowing myself well enough not to put myself in a high-risk situation. So when I first stopped drinking, there were a lot of family gatherings and camping trips that I skipped completely. There would be a lot of drinking, and I knew that I really wasn't ready to put myself back into that environment. So for the first year or two, protecting my recovery meant not going. Eventually, that changed after the first year or two. Then I could go for the day. My family and I could leave after dinner before people really started getting into their cups. And so now, for the past handful of years, I've been able to attend those family gatherings or go somewhere that alcohol is present without spending the whole time worried that I'm going to drink. But that still doesn't mean that I'm just going to go to a bar to hang out while other people drink. I don't think that's very good for my recovery. And if we're meeting somewhere for food that's like a bar, then I can eat and I can leave. I don't need to sit there for hours just to prove that I can. I can probably go to something where drinking is present when I have another reason to be there, but I still don't need to attend the drinking convention just to see how I do. And right now, THC is very different for me. I have far less time away from it. I don't think I need to test myself around people using it casually. And luckily, that isn't really a situation that I encounter very often, if at all. But if I knew people would be sitting around and smoking, I probably would choose not to go. Like I talked about last week, I don't spend all day thinking about getting high anymore. And that's a good thing. But it can also make false confidence easier to believe. I think if I were to watch other people use casually and socially, my mind could eventually start telling me that I'm like them. And maybe I can do that too. But I know where that thought has taken me before. And I don't need to put myself in that situation and then spend the whole time arguing with myself. I can just make the safer decision and not go. This is where I think a reasonable amount of fear can be healthy. I think fear for me becomes a problem when it unnecessarily shrinks my whole life. But using also made my life a lot smaller. So choosing not to put myself in one high risk situation, it really helps keep the rest of my life intentionally bigger. So I think saying no to one risky situation can really be an act of self-trust because I'm choosing the life I want over a test that I don't really need to take. But there is a fine line between learning to trust myself again and getting so confident that I stop paying attention. I really don't want to become so confident that I stop respecting what addiction did to my thinking or what certain situations can wake up in me. But I also don't want to live like every single difficult emotion is an emergency or proof that I'm about to lose everything. That can be a really weird line to walk. On one side, I could watch myself all day and treat every bad mood like a warning that I'm about to relapse. That would make my life smaller again, I think. But on the other side, I could get overconfident, ignore patterns that I already recognize, and put myself in situations I don't really need to be in. Neither one of those really sounds like freedom to me. And I've talked about in previous episodes letting the first wave of feelings pass, using the tools that I have, praying, or taking something to my sponsor or therapist. I don't need to go through that whole list again. What feels new here is trusting myself to notice whether I'm dealing with an ordinary hard feeling or whether something is starting to pull me in a direction that's really bad for my recovery. And I may not know right away, right? Sometimes I try something small and then the feeling passes, but sometimes it doesn't. And I realize I need help. Self-trust really isn't getting that call right on the very first try. It's trusting myself to keep paying attention and then not letting pride keep me from changing direction. And that's why I don't think self-trust can mean doing all of this by myself. One of the ways I trust myself now is that I know when to bring somebody else in. I talk about bringing the right thing to the right people all the time. I know I do. But I keep coming back to it because I think it's really important that we have a support system and that we actually use it. This time, I'm looking at it through the lens of self-trust. If my thoughts are spiraling, my hurt is becoming resentment, or I'm building a case in my head that gets stronger every time I replay it, that's usually a sign that I need another person in the process. Sometimes I need comfort, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes I need someone who can validate what I'm feeling and still tell me the hard truth. My sponsor or therapist can help me understand why something hurts, but also help me see what belongs to me, what I can't control, and what I might be missing. I need people who are safe enough to do both. My support system today, it extends beyond my wife. There was a time when I expected too much of one person because I didn't have enough healthy places to bring what was happening inside of me. But today I have more places to take those things. And trusting myself, I think, means knowing when to use that support instead of expecting myself or my marriage to kind of hold everything. For me, sometimes the right place is prayer. And I can pray something like this. Hey God, please guard my heart from resentment. Help me forgive without expectations and show me what belongs to me today. Amen. I'm not asking God in that prayer to make another person do what I want. I'm asking him to help me handle my side of something that I may not be able to change. Giving something to God, for me, doesn't mean I stop being responsible. It just means I stop pretending that I control the whole outcome. I don't have to solve everything alone. I just have to make the next trustworthy decision with what is in front of me. So when you hit a hard moment this week, here's the question I want you to ask. What would be the trustworthy decision for me right now? And the answer is not going to look the same for all of us. Maybe you've had a terrible day. You're irritable and everything feels heavier than it really is. You may not need to solve your whole life that night. Maybe you need to eat something take a shower, watch something, pray, or go to bed early and just see what tomorrow feels like. Maybe you've had an argument and now you've spent hours replaying it, building your case, and becoming more convinced that you're completely right. That may be the moment to call someone safe and say, hey, I need you to listen, but I also need you to tell me what I might be missing. And that one's hard because a lot of times for me, when I'm feeling really hurt, I just want people to sit in it with me. And so it's really hard to ask someone, hey, I need you to kind of call me out here if I'm missing something. But it's honestly one of the first trustworthy steps that we can take. Or maybe you're invited somewhere where drinking, using, gambling, or another old behavior will be the whole point. You don't have to go just to prove that you've changed. The trustworthy decision might be declining. Prayer may be part of the answer for me, and you may not be at that place in your faith yet. You may not have a sponsor or a therapist today either, but you can still ask the question in an honest way. And if the honest answer is that you need help and you don't have someone safe to call, then that tells you something useful. Part of your next trustworthy decision may be starting to look for that person. It could be somebody in recovery, a mentor, a counselor, a pastor, or another safe person who cares more about your life than about agreeing with every conclusion you reach. I want you to use the question the next time something feels off. That's it. Just stop long enough to ask whether this is a moment you can work through, something you need to bring to somebody safe, or a situation you don't need to test yourself against. You don't have to prove that you can handle everything. You just need to make the decision that protects your recovery today. If I look back, I don't think I could have convinced the version of me in active addiction that he couldn't trust himself yet, because he probably would have told me that I didn't understand. He would have explained why the next plan was different and why he really did have it under control this time. And if I kept pushing, he probably would have returned to, you're speaking gibberish, weirdo. So I don't know that I would try to win that argument with him. I think I would just tell him that trusting himself isn't always going to feel this hard. I would tell him that one day he won't be trying to carry all of this alone or expecting his wife to be his entire support system. That he'll have healthy places to bring the things he can't handle by himself. And that he'll learn that by asking for help, it can be one of the most trustworthy decisions he ever makes. I would tell him that self-trust won't show up all at once. It'll build slowly every time he respects a boundary instead of testing it, recognizes when he needs support, or asks whether something is good for his recovery and accepts that answer. I still don't trust myself in every possible situation. And I don't think honesty requires me to pretend that I do, but I trust myself to protect my recovery. I trust myself to stay in the process when the first thing I try doesn't really work. And I trust myself to ask for help before a difficult thought becomes a destructive decision. And maybe the clearest way I can say this is that it doesn't hurt less. I just trust myself more when I am hurt. To me, that's what learning to trust myself again looks like. I don't have to believe every thought or solve everything alone or walk into a risky situation to prove something. I just have to be honest about where I am and then ask what the trustworthy decision would be right now and then be willing to make it. And that's part of rebuilding real life. So I want to thank you guys for listening today. Remember, we're not perfect, just willing. Have a good one, y'all. And I will see you next week.